Okay, hello everyone. My voice has found the moment again. And I wanted to share a concept I call mastering unknown dimensions. And in this episode, I want to rebuild the structure or blueprint we can give the world and to share with the audience the way one human being on this rock in the middle of nowhere is approaching existence and experience. In the subtitle, I've written solo piloting and collective piloting, and I will build up to what I mean by those terms. You see, dear listeners, first of all, we are creatures of a physical form. We are life forms, and there is the form, and then there is the life. The life that moves the form, that animates the form, that we as human beings call free will. And there is life wherever we are as long as we are alive. So first, I want to start from the materialistic perspective of reality. After 4.5 billion years, a creature has evolved to such a unique sophistication that it's as if not only is it a mystery how objects suddenly became subjects, but there's a mystery of how the subject is moving the object. And so 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere experience reality in dimensions that are known and in dimensions that are unknown. Human life is moving in a world, and as you engage the world, it unravels. Now, there are not a lot of people, I would say, maybe there are, I'm not aware of, but there isn't a lot of people commenting on how to pilot your attention in that which surrounds reality. And you know, in society, they say when you see something, say something. As a human being, I have seen something, seen a way that our intelligence can function, that it doesn't matter if your eyes are closed or open. And so it goes to the core of how attention is simultaneously being existence, which we call consciousness. I want you to think that there is an event. Nature is an event, and we are part of that event. And we all know that we're not here to be completely till the end of the event, as if existing, just the mere sense of being a character in a world. We are a temporary character. At least we have that sort of global conclusion. That means it doesn't matter if you're spiritual, religious, materialistic, all of them have the common denominator that we are found within a physical format, and this physical format will in some sense dissolve. It's as if right now, as a physical human being, I'm speaking to you. It's as if I am an iceberg, and we have this notion that everything is energy, right? We say through a scientific context, the first law of thermodynamics, we say that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can transform from form to form. So it's as if there is an energy that is being existence, and how this existence is changing is like this energy going from form to form, and we notice that it's as if it's like we are an iceberg and the ocean is like energy. It's as if there's an ocean of energy, which is like on one side just being energy that is not created or destroyed, but from another side it is being a changing world. And so we as human beings, the system, the way our biology is designed is that we have access to the world as if the computer is turned on when we wake up, or we log in to physical based consciousness, and then when we sleep we log out of our consciousness, but we know that the next day we wake up and we exist. There's so many people who fear the idea of death, but every night they go to sleep sound asleep, as if it's as if it wasn't a big deal that the eyes are returning to the unknown. And so I want to pretty much say, like when I speak, there's a geometry behind my words. That geometry is like I'm looking at a point, and then through different ways that I look at reality, there's a line that goes through that point, and it creates a polarity. So I am saying that there is an event going on. This event, think of it this way. Whoever who has probably like a lot of people don't, but if you had right now a notebook in front of you with an empty page, I'm looking for if you had a notebook in front of you, it would be as if we start from life as an event. There's no qualities we're giving, it's just a happening, something that's happening. And then this event came into the first duality, which is of the individual and the collective. This relationship of the individual and collective is another way of saying there is a character and then there is a world. So from this character and world, we bring in another duality, the second wave of duality, as if it's just something that's happening that is life. And so there's the relationship of the form with the space, the individual and the collective, the character and the world, the character with the setting. And now for the character, there is another duality. This is the second duality, which is of the unknown and of the known. And when we look at the world, there is an unknown and a known. This is like the second duality that I am, in some sense, the second layer of division that I am overlaying over this event that is this life. So, I came looking for an empty piece of paper. I lost the notes that I had made in the just a second, guys. I think I lost the page where it was all written on. Oh, there we go. I found it. So I spoke about in the subtitle. I shared this idea of solo piloting, collective piloting. I can actually bring it here. So what it is that draw a point, draw two lines from it, the individual and the collective, and make those into points, and then draw another two lines from each of those points and make that the unknown and the known for each. And now the solo piloting is how a person independently functions, how their intelligence in this reality, as if its life is an intelligent event. This intelligence is divided between the individual and the world, the individual and the collective. Now, solo piloting is how you, as an individual, acknowledge the known dimensions and the unknown dimensions. And when I say master the unknown dimensions, that mastery allows you to pilot in a way that I have termed it goes beyond the language threshold. And when I say it goes beyond the language threshold, the more life becomes unknown, the less the past can in some sense grab its meaning, right? It's as if the past has grabbed what the future has to mean. And in some sense, when we see something unknown, it's as if the past can't touch it. The past can't see what it is touching. right? So solo piloting, as if think of it as if there is a known piloting and an unknown piloting, or there's a sense of an individual known self-mastery. Let's say there's a known self-mastery and an unknown self-mastery for the individual. In this episode, even though I'm going to share the spectrum, but I want to focus on unknown mastery, how you master the unknown self and how the unmastery of the unknown world may appear. And so whoever's listening right now, in what I'm going to say further from this point, please keep in mind what Aristotle said long time ago. He said, it is the sign of an educated mind to acknowledge an idea without accepting it. I'm not someone here saying, hey guys, truth. No. There is no truth like that we can point to. There is no truth you can point to. Do you know? I am simply a human being. I consider that we were tribes, hunter-gatherers in the past, and so hunter-gatherers would explore and bring something back to the tribe. Now we have become subjective-oriented creatures, and we're living subjectively, and so I consider the subjective dimensions of the human being, literally in these talks of mine I call it the inner realms. The objective dimensions of the human being are the outer realms. So in my effort in speaking right now in this podcast, I am in some sense being a hunter-gatherer of the inner realms and trying to share something with 8 billion human beings on this planet, where there is so many ways you can perceive its downside. But it was Buckminster Fuller and Marshall McLuhan who, in some sense, from those two people at least in my life, I got the greatest perspective of human civilization, one of the greatest catalysts from my perspective of human civilization, where they said it's called Spaceship Earth. So it's not that every person alone is trying to succeed. It is we are all crew members of one existential activity that has recently developed language. When I say recently developed language, if you think of how long the universe was, and when we as creatures began having a sophistication with an overlay of a subjective world in the objective world, it's like as if yesterday we developed language, if you think of how fast the scale of time can be, whether time is a giant fish or not, So I want to focus on the solo piloting, but to just keep going with the flow of the episode. Right now I am an individual speaking to a collective space. That means any situation I have found in my life, prior to being able to believe or disbelieve in anything, there is a geometry of one's existential activity. That means people can see their body. They can see their physical body. They can, in some sense, see other physical bodies. That means not only can you objectify yourself, that means you have no choice when you wake up, you are an objectified self, but in some sense, we perceive others as objects. And for example, a person looks at a rock on the ground, that's just an object. But when you look at another human being, you are not seeing just an object. You are seeing an object that, dare I say, seems to be possessed by a subject. You see, it's like people have this urge of, like right now in 2021, it's as if marketing is not at its honest dimensions. We're experiencing a phase of dishonest marketing, where it's as if low quality products are kind of being sold as if they're great, and people who are oblivious, they become, they fuel an unnecessary fire. So it's as if we are living in a civilization. I mean, not only does the animal have to possess strength to be able to survive, that is just key. It's as if you don't eat food, you don't have strength to live the next day. If you don't drink water, if you don't sleep, if you don't have shelter, these are kind of like the basic levels of existence everybody goes through. Temperature is also crucial. Now, this creature as if, think of it as if there was a snowball moving in the space-time continuum, evolutionary wise, and this snowball at some point started to go towards things that in a massive spectrum and hierarchical system it valued, it desired more. You know what it is? There is this notion of desire, but there are some mystics who they don't have the concept of desire, they have this concept that moments are calling them. Do you see? So it's as if when a person like suddenly is walking by and they see something they desire, whether it's a person, whether it's an object, whether it's a possibility, an image, a photograph, whatever, you know, a photograph of the future, that whatever the person desires, do you see? It's as if from the mystical sense, it was as if something is calling to you, and do you respond to the call or do you not? You know, that means there could be somebody who is, let's say, mischievous calling us, and there could be somebody who is compassionate calling us. So how does the person decide which calling they respond to, or which urge of movement of life force in the moment or they accept, or how do they pilot their attention at the moment? And this question is so vast and unknown and complex that anything a human being says is just touching the tip of the iceberg. That means I will attempt to go as far as I can, but I will tell you, even if we had the whole species working on this, it would definitely be a massive help, but at the same time, the unknown stands watching over us as if the known cannot see it. So anyways, when it comes to how the individual dimensions of the human being move, we know that in the sense of known piloting, it has to do with information. So what that means is that if you want to pilot as a known individual, you require information allocation. Now, if you want to pilot as an unknown individual, or let me say it this way, let's start from the individual known and the collective known. That means if a person wants to master, let's say, their individual known self, they have to in some sense function in the observable universe. They can't just sit still or meditate like till the end of time, you know. They have to function to cultivate a mastery of their individual dimensions. Now, let's say somebody wants to master the world, it is the same. That means the known self, piloting the known self requires information of yourself, known things about your own self, you know, which your memories contribute to. And then if we want to pilot as the known world, we require memories of the world. And memories of the world is another way of saying historic events, or what we are fathoming as 8 billion creatures on a rock who suddenly started making sophisticated mouth noises as the history or our knowledge. So in some sense, knowledge is like when there was a camera, there were scribes in the past, and these scribes managed to relay to some level of accuracy archetypes that were active in the past. So, to cultivate mastery of the known world, you require to experience the known world. To cultivate mastery of, let's say, the known self, you require to experience known dimensions of yourself. All those people who are athletes, they have mastered this. They have mastered the observable dimensions of, to some degree, the observable dimensions of their being. For example, I'll say this, Shaolin monks, ever since I was a child, they were fascinating to me because they seem to be peaceful, great warriors, where everywhere you look, the warrior has to be inspired by some sort of anger or rage. You know, it's as if an angry person seems to be more powerful than a peaceful person. right? So the piece in a lot of shows, the piece is under attack, but you never see a show where there is like an angry universe and then peaceful, there's a peaceful kind of retaliation to that anger, you know. That means not a lot of science fiction novels are being inspired based on Gandhi's life story, for example. There is an attention here, and how this attention, there's a mystery of how it's being, then there's a mystery of what it's doing. Guys, I totally forgot, I just saw it in my notes, there was another dualistic layer after the known and the unknown. So that thing I was telling people to draw, which is pretty much branching dualistically from one point, I'll just say it again just to clarify in case people missed it. I'm saying life is an event. We're not giving it any attributes. It's just something that's happening. You know, it's something that's being, let's say. And then there is the relation, the first wave of, let's say, the first duality, the individual and the collective relationship, the character in a world. And then we go towards, from, think of as if the individual and collective are, again, two more points. And we have the known, the unknown and the known for the individual, and we have the unknown and the known for the collective. This is the second layer of duality. Now the third layer of duality was the verb and the noun. This is what I had written in my notes, which I forgot to share. The verb and the noun. What that means is, as an individual, as in, let's say, known individual, you can just not move and the moment will feel like a noun, right? Or you can animate and move and it feels like a verb. Okay, so I'm saying that when it comes to piloting as an individual, there is piloting as the known self, but then this known self has access to two states of either being a photograph or being a film, either being in a verb or a noun, either being dynamic or static. So there is the unknown individual's dynamism and the unknown individual's, let's say, stasis or static nature, and then we have the same with the individual. And when we go to the collective, there's the same thing, right? And this is such a huge implication. Let me tell you why. This is an implication that a single self is actually can experience two states of selfhood, which each become four states of selfhood. So that means there's the dynamic unknown individual, the static unknown individual, and then the same for the known individual, and then the same for the collective world, and same for the same for the unknown collective and the unknown, the known collective. This means that if there are four states for human beings, if we consider the collective to be civilization, there are four types of civilizations. I would say, just like there are four states to self, there's four states of how a civilization can function. For example, if we think of a world and a known world, right now we're in a known world. If a person thinks the world is good, that is like a static known world view. Do you know? If somebody in some sense says life is just ever changing, those people who experientially know that there's change going on here, that change makes it in some sense a dynamic known world, right? And the civilization goes in accordance to that context, right? Civilization is pretty much the effort of human beings to do something in the middle of nowhere. I am telling you, the biggest inspiration for me to actually care about the content of my mind or what it's happening, it was as if an implication that there's something going on you don't know about, right? And that's just like, can you imagine? It's like, imagine something important's happening and everything in nature knows it except human beings, you know? But the focus is for this episode mastering unknown dimensions. So I would say more than talking about the known world and the known self, these are things that many people have had opinions and information on, have shared information on. But I want to focus on the unknown self and, in some sense, the unknown individual pilot, let's say unknown solo piloting, and in some sense, unknown collective piloting. You know, the unknown collective piloting is very, it is the thing that, it is the mystery of mysteries, let me tell you that. It is the most important mystery of mysteries. You know, not just how an individual walks in a realm, you know, as in an existential event where there's a focus on experience and existence as an individual. It's as if after you're done with your individual dimensions, you're like, okay, I saw the known ways of my intelligence and I've experienced certain range of unknown moments, you know, and so after that it becomes as if, wait a minute, how is the species and its efforts going to walk into a future that is unknown until we act? You see, every person that is alive right now, it's because their ancestors acted. It's because their ancestors were responded to the calling of the continuation of life in space. So, towards the solo piloting. By the way, I've written something here about solo piloting culture. I think I read it at the beginning, but I'm just gonna share it again to set the context again. Cultivating mastery of the unknown dimensions in your inner realms, and cultivating mastery of the unknown dimensions in the outer realms. That means, what do we do with known, familiar moments in the space-time continuum, and what do we do with unfamiliar moments in the space-time continuum? If you look at most people, I've observed this personally, that most people don't like stepping into the unknown, as if the unknown is like the darkness, but not a darkness that is connected to the connotation of morality. The unknown is that which we can't have an opinion on. And I feel many people, they want to be certain, you know, they want to have certainty, they want to be something specific in every moment. So very few people can be explorers in 2021 based on the culture, global culture, and the type of civilization we have built. I consider this civilization 1.0 the first prototype, the first effort of what human beings did on a rock in the middle of nowhere. But it doesn't mean that civilization is not going to change, and I've spoken about civilization 2.0 being the successor of civilization 1.0, but not dismissing, not ruling, but in some sense efficiently collaborating. You know, that is really where the skills of every unique DNA on this planet begins to serve the world they're in. There's so many people, when somebody begins talking about metaphysics, and the word metaphysics means after the physics. So, and many people who have wondered about what do you do after the physics, they have come to the conclusion that you have to give selfless devotion, selfless service, or you have to, let's call it worship, but not in a blind, let's say it as if devotion. You know, many people feel that there's an archetype of truth and they gotta devote themselves to that, right? So many people on the planet, it's like it ranges to the numbers of billions, where some people are devoted to a specific god. For example, think of in India, you know, so many different types of god specifications, you know. Some people are worshipping, showing devotion to Rama, Krishna, Lakshmi, human beings are just, it's as if it's like some part of the human psychology, like a bird that needs to land on the branch, needs to hold on to some sort of truth. And then after the person's held on to whatever sort of simulatory truth that their perception has generated, right, then they devote themselves to it. But the issue has been that it has just been a devotion to objects and subjects. And what would a devotion to an unknown dimension beyond objects and subjects be like, right? It would mean it would come to the resolve of the explorer. You see, there are some human beings who are satisfied by the levels that their intelligence occurs, but I would say it's unavoidable that there is a percentage of human beings who they are not content with the way the limit of their perception has been set. Want to surpass what we have seen. It's kind of like the boredom psychology. You've seen it before, you want to see something else. Those people who have the urge to see something else, they're not afraid of the unknown, rather they're attempting to understand it. Not only do the eyes of the explorer get to see what else there is in the moment first, they are also gifted with the responsibility of sharing that with the tribe. In my experience of solo piloting, of course I have moved my physical body in this realm. That's the sort of known piloting. I have experienced moments where I am moving, the body is moving, and moments where the body is still, even if a person becomes completely still, because like their lungs are working, their heart is beating. It's not complete stillness, but it is more like how Lao Tzu says, action through inaction. When you enter an effortless state, you observe the effort of the reality around you, the effort of the world around you. Right. So in my experience, I have observed, the stillness of the observable self, and I have experienced the verb, the dynamism of the observable self. But now, if I am to tell you of how I have experienced the unknown, how I have in a solo way piloted into the unknown, I would say the unknown verb and the unknown noun. First of all, unknown noun, bless Coll, where he in some sense shared the concept of archetypes. It is true. You see, an unknown space is like you standing in the dark. Now, what does a person do? Imagine standing in the dark. They try to look for a light switch, or let's say there's a candle in the room and they have matches and they go light the candle. So the nature of reality is those who want to pilot in the unknown dimensions, that means forget any spiritual connotation, forget any supernatural imagery. The New Age community is filled with it, and for a second, for a moment, for an instant, just be as if you don't know the unknown, as if the unknown is unknown, as if this is the first line of code written when it comes to solo piloting. And those who are not comfortable with the unknown, it's the same with silence, right? Those who are not comfortable with silence, they in some sense They're not comfortable with speaking, but those who are comfortable with the moment going to silence, as if it's a realization that there's silence, as if like space and matter, or like matter is like sounds created in this space. Matter is generated. From a religious perspective, from the Abrahamic traditions, monotheistic traditions, I would say it's as if God spoke existence, as if existence, the creation of the human being, it was a command. This command was, in some senses, as if first was the word. So it was as if there was a pen that connected to paper, or in some sense a universal intelligence began speaking in silence. And this is a crucial point, because there are Sufi mystics of the kind of such as Rumi, where Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi, the Sufi mystic poet from 700 years ago, and he has this incredible quote where he says, "Silence is the language of God, all else is poor translation." As if those people who try to find truth in words, in some sense, it's not that it's right or wrong, it's just that it's as if, imagine somebody sending you a text message and you thinking that the text message is them. It's ridiculous. What they are is inconceivable to the dimensions of the text message. So imagine somebody sends you a text message and says, "Hey, meet me here," right? And imagine you, instead of going to where the text message is saying, the person's like, no, I'm just going to read this text message forever. I'm going to frame this text message on my wall, and I'm going to worship this text message till the end of time. It's as if there are dimensions when it comes to the concept of truth, which are experiential. Experiential, whenever someone's experiencing something, imagine you're bungee jumping, skydiving, riding a horse into battle, imagine in medieval times or whatever, right? So it's as if in anything that becomes a sort of known, you can say unknown verb-like state, it is a state that is surpassing language. It is a state that is surpassing an ability to take a photograph of the moment, because any photograph you take changes. The person, for example, in the New Age community, there are people who are talking to aliens, right? And so what does that imply? It's as if first the person, in some sense, thought it was, let's say they were raised religious, they thought it was God, then they suddenly saw a couple science fiction movies, they thought it was an alien, then it's like they saw something else, they thought it was like a spiritual guru or whatever. Do you see? So it's as if it's our relationship with the unknown dynamic nature of the self. And many people shape this, right? They get attached to the findings of their inner realms. And so this is very crucial. There's this Zen story where there's this Zen monk, this very profound Zen monk, and this Zen monk is sitting in this grassland alone, and in midday, the sky is white, the grass is green, and he's just sitting there, right? Suddenly he realizes something about the nature of emptiness. As if every object you see, it's as if our mind is imposing something into it. The object is just being there. It's like existence doesn't need additional language to talk about it. It's just something that's existing. It's something that is there. Kind of like in philosophy, the concept of universals. For example, blue. Like blue is a color, that's a universal in the sense that it's as if there is no other language needed. Blue is blue. It's like what it is its meaning. So this monk suddenly realizes the nature of emptiness, and he realizes the nature of how his mind is imposing itself, as if there is a spirit, and this spirit is putting itself into outer realm phenomena, or you can say even inner realm phenomena, and suddenly realizing the nature of emptiness. They realizing that it's the one painting the meaning of life over this event, this unknown event, the known meaning of life. So this Zen monk gets a realization about emptiness, and in this Zen story, it's very fascinating. In this Zen story, This monk is sitting down, suddenly gets this realization, and they say there's a dark minion in another dimension. And this dark minion suddenly sees this Zen monk getting enlightened, as if seeing more about the true nature of reality, and he runs to the Dark Lord. And he runs to the Dark Lord and says, Dark Lord, this Zen monk's understood more about the truth. What do we do? And the Dark Lord looks at the dark minion and says, don't worry. This is pretty much the moral of the Zen story. The Zen monk says, don't worry. This person, whatever realization he makes, whatever updated insight he attains, he's going to make a belief out of it. And the moment you make a belief out of it, it's as if you've closed the world again. As if that moment when you see the unknown, that's pretty much like the excitement of life, you know. Think of it as if all those kids kind of like, you know, past their curfew, like in you see this in shows where it's like past the kid's curfew, the kid is like stepping outside of his window to go to a party or something, right? It's the calling of the unknown, you know, or the calling of adventure or something, you know. But because the human being wants to know everything, it will eventually shape its finding. So I would say there's very few people I mean, I shouldn't say there's very few people, but it's as if like most people are more comfortable knowing what's going on rather than just being able to stand in this unknown event and endlessly recalibrate it, right? That means in accordance to this Zen story, if there's a truth to it, I would say it's another way of saying that truth has no edge. Every concept is untrue in a dynamic reality. You see, so it's as if truth is not a photograph, it's not a picture, it's having a relationship with what is moving this film. And so certain dimensions of this film of life, you are directing it, and certain dimensions of it, we are not directing it. For example, the birds flying in the sky right now I see, you know, I am not directing them. It's like my voice has nothing to do with them. Do you see it? But when this talk I'm giving, I'm directing it. I'm piloting the nature of my attention in this moment. And so this nature of attention is inspired by the potential of the life force, as if you need space before you can move in the space. If you want to have new furniture in your home, you got to get rid of the old furniture to have the space for the new furniture. But the issue with the human psychology is that so many people are attached to their past that they don't want to get rid of the old furniture to create states of mind or to enter states of mind where novelty becomes their teacher. That means those people who the past is becoming their truth, they are not in the present. They have as if given up on the future. It's easier to go hide and bunker, you know, behind ideologies that have been found rather than those ideas that are still waiting for us to find them. You know, those ways of perception that are awaiting us. You see, the unknown is the greatest calling to life. I am telling you, in this lifetime of mine, you know, there is no greater power. People thinking like, you know, like a dictator is powerful, you know, or Superman looking in the mirror. Do you know what I mean? I'm telling you, these are just games. You see, the mystery surpasses the human personification of the cosmos. Now, in order to be able to pilot, though, regardless of that Zen story I said, a human being needs to master the known dimensions. It doesn't mean you master it completely, where it's as if everybody is like Superman. But it means you cultivate contentment with the nature of how the dimensions of your perception are unraveling. there's a Zen story, I'll share this too, where there's this one monk who, meditates, gets this another profound realization about emptiness. And this monk goes to his guru. In this Zen story, there's a teacher, right? There's a teacher archetype. And he goes to this Zen master, his guru or whatnot. It's not guru, his teacher. And the teacher is sitting there smoking a pipe, in the Zen story. And the disciples like, teacher, I've realized emptiness. I've realized there's nothing here. I've realized it's a hallucination. I've realized it's all a mirage in a desert, and there's nothing here. We're in a simulation that would never existed, as if nobody was ever here. As if he's saying, like, because Buddha talked about emptiness, this disciple thinks he's understood that emptiness, right? So he goes and says this to the guru in a very intense way, as if like he's sharing like his greatest finding. And he's like, it's empty, it's all empty. There's no guru, there's no teacher, there's no me, there's nothing here, And this is where in the Zen story, the guru who's smoking his pipe after a while empties his pipe and suddenly hits the disciple in the head. And the disciple gets startled and he's like, why did you do that? And the teacher says, if it's all empty, then where did that anger come from? Where did your reaction come from? As if it's like, it's not just as easy as saying there's nothing there. There's a sophistication of this intelligent event that is being all of us in one moment. And way before we can even collectively pilot, everybody has to realize, as the Buddha said, you're born alone and you die alone. And if there is comrades or companions, that is a blessing. That is like a gift from the universe, Or as if the lords of karma have seen that your work is bigger than just two hands. So now towards the solo piloting in unknown dimensions, how to master these unknown dimensions. First of all, it's a very huge, very big truth that exposure is crucial. Exposure means having a relationship with the unknown variables in your moment, and in some sense cultivating a contentment with something not having meaning, as if people are comfortable like understanding something, but the person has to have an ability to just be able to stand under something without understanding it, because that's the nature of the universe, right? It's as if we're not all being like sad and depressed because we can't see the edge of the universe to explore it completely, right? We have contentment. Like nobody right now cares, for example, for I shouldn't say nobody, but like very few people care for the Andromeda galaxy, like our neighboring galaxy. We're more concerned from where our eyes are starting, It's as if like, let's say there was an explosion in the Andromeda galaxy. It's as if us on this rock in this in the Milky Way galaxy, it's as if we don't care, right? So it's as if strangely we have a contentment with what we can see and what we don't know, because we don't know what to do with it, right? But that's a very important state. Think of it as if you're a person who you somehow, just think of it hypothetically, okay, you physically did everything on this planet, okay, and at the same time all the greatest teachers and databases of information were all given to you. The greatest all the teachers in the world gave you their greatest teaching instantly, okay? Now the only thing that would be left is the unknown. Solo piloting as an unknown self in an unknown world, that's for those people. These talks of mine are for those people who something in their life has revealed to them that beyond what we think there is intelligence, and that intelligence even goes beyond the word. So when it comes to that solo piloting, the first thing is you gotta have comfort with the unknown. This means if you're someone who, if you feel like a fool, you get angry, you get emotional, right? This doesn't mean you become ignorant, like you walk like someone who's oblivious of the world around them. But I'm saying like the person has to, just like a pilot, has to have various abilities in function in being able to pilot the airplane, or in the sense that I'm speak of and I've spoken about in other talks. I term it the pilots of consciousness. We're literally piloting our free will in the space-time continuum. So when it comes to this piloting, the person has to cultivate an ability to pilot through various elevations, right? So imagine you're a pilot and you go into a stormy cloud, or a stormy cloud appears out of nowhere, you instantly pilot out of it, or you see a storm coming and you pilot in a different direction, right? It's the same for the mind, whether you use the metaphor of the analogy of the storm or the analogy of neighborhood. It's as if, like, when I say the inner realms, I'm saying it's literally like a world. It's as if, like, when somebody is upset, there's the saying, they say they're in a bad place or they're in a good place. Similarly, if somebody went to a dangerous neighborhood, or they went to a very pleasant part of the neighborhood, same thing, they're in a good place, in a bad place. So when it comes to the human psychology, there's a reason, beyond reason, why there is free will. And so this free will is not something we can understand as if, what is it that's looking through my eyes, but we know that it's as if our role as conscious personalities for now is to maneuver, it's to navigate, as if the meaning of life, even though I'm saying exploration, that's crucial to know, but at the same time, it's not like the person can know everything, right? So that leaves you into being this, like, attention in the space-time continuum that is like how the they would say, like, the monkey mind is jumping from branch to branch. It's like, similarly, you have to have an ability to be able to close your eyes, and all the images that you perceive, or words you perceive, or types of eventhood, whether they're memory, abstract eventhood, whether they are visualizations or memory, you have to be able to watch them. So just like how a person can watch, like, a film, when you attain an ability that you can watch your mind as a event, or like a film happening over the outer realms, that's where you find, I would say, the stillness and the ability to pilot. That means you're not getting caught by a storm cloud. Somebody could say they're a pilot, but the moment they go into a storm, they don't know how to get out of it, right? So it has to be a familiarity with various states of mind, with various elevations. Think of it as if you're someone who is, let's say, 30 years old, or 50 years old, or 80 years old, or let's say even 10 years old, right? These are all implications of the various moments you have lived through, as if every human being has piloted from their birth up to now through various ways of how life has been. Right? So everybody technically has to have had piloted their outer realm, so in some sense their known self and their known world, right? If you can't have a relationship with the known world, you can't survive in it. If the animal doesn't pay attention to the ecosystem, it gets devoured, right? So similarly, if the human being does not realize that there's an information age, and information really is, I would say, there's the linguistic simulation, as if the species is enchanted by the language it has overlaid upon the world. And so that language, words, they are symbolic translations of images. So when somebody reads a book, that's just ink on paper, but if they read the words quickly, it becomes a film. They begin to suddenly see a story behind their mind. Right? So this means that all language is an intermediary for image between the inner realms and the outer realms, between the subjective states of reality and the objective states of reality. You know, even in the chart, I ask people to draw it first. You can even create another. We can create a fourth layer of duality. And that fourth layer would be the duality of the unconditional and the conditional. But anyways, or I would say for the fourth layer, it's better to say the infinite and the finite. How long the noun stays, the unknown noun stays, and how long the unknown verb stays, you know. In order to pilot, one has to realize that the pilot has a relationship with like the headquarters, you know, the airports. And the pilot starts off from an airport and lifts off from ground level and goes into, let's say, superior elevations. And then at the end, the pilot lands. Right, so if I would say if in the future I had a workshop and people were like, all right, Mr. Within, how do we do this piloting thing? I would say literally there's a beginning and an end, but the beginning and the end have to be through the consideration that the airport for the psychology of the human being is the human idea. That means that's the most important thing. In many of these episodes of mine, I've said, because I feel some audiences metaphysically oriented may be listening, I say be human first, then be anything else you want. You know, if you want to think you're a Superman, an alien, or whatever, it's like half the human archetype, just the simple human. Because if we cannot be content with the simple dimensions, that thing I said of the infinite finite, you can say, I will just kind of set it in stone. The fourth duality would be the complex and the simple. So there is complex unknown verbs, you know, states, and there's simple unknown verb states. When we are comfortable with the human idea as if it's like an object and we've looked at it from different angles of simplicity and complexity, then the mind can very easily go to the unknown dimensions and it would not be afraid. Why? Because usually when a person is afraid, there is a sense of loss. There's a sense of something beyond their free will changing, right? When a person, for example, combs their hair, or let me say it like this, it's like when a person, you know, moves their body, they're not startled. But when another person like pushes them, they're startled. You know, when something else moves the person freaks out. But when the person moves itself, it doesn't freak out, right? So similarly, it's because it's the comfort of what is in control. And so if a human being realizes that the simplest dimensions of humanity are accessible and you can be content with it, the Zen masters went towards, for example, emptiness. They're like, all right, you know, I realize there's emptiness. Okay, that means there's a huge possibility that nothing is going on here, and all of this is in some sense again the mirage in the desert of phenomenology. So the person needs to have a contentment with simply being a human being and being in a humanized world. Once you're comfortable with this, whatever happens in your inner realms, in way you pilot, whether you're piloting through yogic states of mind, whether you're piloting through psychedelic states of mind, you know, or shamanic states of mind, The headquarters is there. You are aware of the airport where you're lifting off from. And anything happens, you contact that airport. Let's say midway journey. So at some point the plane has to lift off. Now, naturally a person can do this, which is where the yogic states of mind come in, but there are unnatural ways of pushing oneself into the inner realms. For example, those people who have had psychedelic experiences, or like the shamans in Native American times, you can say, it was as if the shamanic relationship was that they would find like these mushrooms or like these roots of a tree, they would make a tea out of it, they would have a ceremony, and then they would enter a different state of consciousness. So their liftoff was from the outer realms. Do you see? As if the person needed something to jump from, or to get a jump. Now, the thing about psychedelics, the issue with that is that, for example, if you take in the one that is most popular and being talked about, for example, mushrooms, right? It's in some sense a sort of fungus. So it's pretty much the body is getting a shock of death, a shock of something that is not familiar to the system. This shock, and also aside from what happens in the brain and the neurology, suddenly projects the attention, let's say, beyond the physical framework of reality. So the person is not in a different world, but the one who's looking at it is different, therefore suggesting a different world. It's as if when somebody wears like a unique colored sunglasses, imagine you wear red sunglasses, it's not that suddenly the world is red, right? It's that your eyes, your brain has been in some sense adjusted to that color, So I wouldn't recommend the psychedelic approach because I don't know, maybe some people are drawn to that, but for me, I have been way more fascinated with the yogic state of mind. And the yogic state of mind was not even seeking an ability for power, or it wasn't just an explorer thing. It was a sort of as if there's an ultimate moment and we need to find this ultimate moment. But this ultimate moment surpasses the stories of the truth seeker and the images or films of truth. Anyways, whether you go into the yogic state of mind, yogis are, instead of taking psychedelics, they're finding it through stillness and silence. Through meditation. Now, when one pilots beyond their human framework, that means ground level with simple human beings in simple human world. Now, as there is more elevations, the sense of self changes, and I would bring in the concept of speed here. And also velocity, speed with a specific direction, speed directed somewhere, right? When I say there's a speed, guys, you see, when a person closes their eyes, if whoever's listening to me right now, I mean, later on after the talk, you can try this. But if you close your eyes, it's not that the world stops moving, the mind is still happening, right? So as you observe the occurrence of the mind from the simplicity that, in a simple human world, in a simple physical world, my simple physical body is just simply is there. Everything beyond that acknowledgement or contentment with the simple dimensions of the self will begin revealing the complexity. So that the moment you're comfortable with the simple, it goes, then you're open, you can access the complex. And complexity is really the built-up of simple actions or incidents. So that complexity becomes a greater speed. Now, I'm just one human being out of 8 billion, and I'm here to share my experience. When I close my eyes, it is a movement. It is as if our intent gives speed. It's as if a person has wonder and fascination, their inner realms move very fast. But if someone is like set in stone in a known form of thought, your inner realms are moving slow. You know why? Because you're filtering every finding from the unknown back through the past filter, the way the past had set the world for you. What I'm talking about is, in some sense, us having an ability as if it's like teleportation. Imagine you were teleported in a world you had never been before. Now imagine you're teleported into an experience, first-person point of view of an experience of self. Now, when this experience of self becomes unconditional, until it gets to that point, it is speeding up. And this is why when people sit down to meditate, unfortunately, some meditation instructors are like, don't have thoughts. That's nonsense, right? The thoughts are not yours to even have. The thoughts come and go. The inner realms comes and goes. Okay, so what it is not in some sense sitting to not have thoughts, but it's like noticing the film. And the more you notice the film, the faster it goes. And the nature of the film, this is the monkey mind they would talk about. The nature of the mind is that the nature of the inner realms is that the inner realms is not, it's as if only those who are worthy poetically access it. Why? Because the inner realm keeps pushing the person into the outer realms. Right? It's just like how the Zen story where the Dark Lord was like, this Zen monk is going to create a belief out of what he finds, right? That belief coordinates back to the human action. So unless you're someone who you feel you have been there, done that in the individual human, in the simple known human idea and the simple known human world, then the complex variations are very easy again to access, right? Once you're content with the simple. Now, I have sat still in moments and my inner realms have sped up, and I've tried to endure in watching them. And there has been moments where I tried and there was, I wouldn't say there was failure, but there was inefficiency. And there were moments where I was called to meditation. When I say called to meditation, guys, I don't know if other people are like this, but there's some ways that I engage nature where it's as if there is, as Terence McKenna said, this incredible quote, which I could kind of share that idea to. He says, there is another tenant in the room. That means if there is known intelligence and happening, there is most likely unknown intelligence. And there are moments I've had where I've suddenly been walking in a park and I've seen like a rock in the middle of a river, or I've seen like somewhere beneath a tree, and just in my inner realms, in where imagination and what we consider in modern times thinking happens, I have seen an image of myself already sitting on that rock or sitting under that tree, and I just walk and go sit there. And it's as if like the inner realms are the first piloting. Okay, so it's like as if the intuition is you become the co-pilot to the main pilot that is the intuition. So therefore it kind of explains this whole notion of faith that so many religious narratives suggest. But to have a shape for God is to actually not have devotion to truth, right? God is inconceivable, yet people are worshiping it and nobody's asking questions anymore. If it is inconceivable, it means a conceived entity cannot access it. So it's as if one has to find a state beyond with the way the mind is endless, like just conceiving things one after another, right? And the best way to do it, I would recommend, or a way that works, is to watch it, right? Once you have found contentment with the simple known dimensions, so then you find contentment also with the unknown. And once you find contentment with the unknown, that means you're just like a person waiting for a bus. You don't know when the bus is going to come, but you're waiting, right? So similarly, there's a lot of waiting when it comes to trying to navigate and pilot in our inner realms. Patience is one of the biggest things to train with, to train in. Right, where the person learns to watch the world happen, like as if like in chess, the white pieces move first and the black pieces move second. I'm telling you, when it comes to the inner realms, you got to be like the black pieces. You got to be able to watch what moves before you do, and then you can start having a relationship with the unknown. But if you move before that move, if you start as, for example, the white pieces, right, where you make the first move, you can't tell what is your free will and what is beyond your free will. So this is very important in all those, and you can say mysticism 101. So I have sat still, eyes closed, watching the content of my mind. Sri Ramana Maharshi says this quote, let what comes come, let what goes go, see what remains. If you're preferenceless and you just trust the nature of how intelligence is being the moment, right, it becomes very easy actually to trust your mind, right? Think of it this way, that a person has to trust their body to be able to move it. Now if we want to use our minds to be able to move as minds, we require to have a trust of the space where the mind is happening. But it doesn't mean you identify out of fear with the archetype and the unknown, right? That is there's a reason in the Bhagavad Gita it says those who follow a demigod, it's unauthorized. It leads to truth, but it's unauthorized. That means it's like you are being an unauthentic mind if you're worshipping a demigod, you know. But the authenticity of it is that there is intelligence here, right now. It's like, where else can truth be if there is truth? Just think about it, right? Is truth waiting for us, or is truth here and now, like right here? It has to exist if it is to have meaning, and existence is instant. So my laptop's battery's low, guys. Hold on for a moment. Okay. The coolest thing about this world is that the sky is limitless. And so piloting in the inner realms is also piloting through a limitless sky. So, where was I? Yeah, so the attention of the human being in experience needs to have a contentment with the simple dimensions, and then all that is left is to explore the complex dimensions. Now, as one goes to experience those complex dimensions, there is dynamism and speed. And so when I had my eyes closed and I was watching my inner realms, the film began becoming quicker, and it reached a certain point where I knew there was visualization, there was some sort of, as Immanuel Kant calls it, numenology. As you watch the inner realms, you become acquainted with speeds of, at least in my case, cinematic experiences in your inner realms that are going faster than how you as a person normally perceive images. That means when you ask a person a question, there's a sort of speed into their inner realms that they're acquainted with, which is their thinking. When you notice a speed that is not, you're watching that speed, if I can say something like this, then the nature of the moment goes from the simple known self towards the complexity of an unknown self, that the faster and faster it becomes unconditional. The faster it becomes unconditional. Now, before it gets to that unconditional point, all those people who have a relationship with the divine as a person, this division between the person and the self goes away. And so what appears is that you arise as eyes in space. These these eyes in space in their unconditional self, what that means, there is no more a sense of self, then the moment moves on its own. And when it moves on its own, it's as if your whole life you were thinking, I gotta think of the truth, like the truth has to be thought up. Do you see? It becomes something where it moves on its own, just like how we don't think about our heart. It just happens. It's as if in the inner realms you reach a certain phase where things are involuntarily happening. Do you see? But they're not happening in accordance to shape. They're happening in accordance to how that unknown observer has noticed itself beyond the conditions of its perception. So when it gets to that state, in my case, what can happen is that you remain there. You just are it, or you utilize that state for your individual selfhood. So once you pilot into the unknown dimensions in your attempts of cultivating mastery of it, then you pilot back down to the human ideal, because in that state there is no purpose, there is nothing lacking, there is nothing there. There is no more a story to the world. You are just sight. You see, that sight it instantaneously knows, as if time is the content of its knowing. It's not the knower, if I can say. So think of it this way, that as a person, I'm saying that when it comes to piloting mastering your individual known dimensions, whether they're dynamic or whether they're static, in that observance one becomes acquainted with their being, and this being is, nobody owns it, it's just there. Then you have the choice, I would say, and I shouldn't say you have the choice. Then you either, as if the iceberg has melted into the ocean, you stand. It's like right now we are trying to we're trying to attain knowledge. In that state, you are the knowledge. You are the knowledge. It's as if there is no one who can know it. Do you know? And if that experience, in some sense, like it's as if like an unknown state recalibrates all the ways you have known states of mind and states of existence and states of experiences of existence. So that recalibration is the most helpful thing that can happen. Aside from that recalibration, you cultivate trust. If you, like, I have personally experienced the state a couple times, and wherever I am, in an instant I am it. I don't know how to say it. I can go into it, right? And I say it playfully to people around me. It's as if I go into my forehead. What I mean by that is that it's as if I am, in that state I am not a human being, but there is being that is aware there is human. That being, just by the nature of its state, surpasses everything. It is as if the ultimate inspiration. It's as if, from this side of the coin, there is this unknown spirit in a known body. From that side of the coin, there is a known spirit with an unknown body inside it. Rather than the unknown spirit being inside the known body, there is an unknown body inside the known spirit. That means you are the knowing of that in that state. And it goes beyond humanization. It's as if you are right now looking out through your eyes, just first person point of view, this is third person of all the content accessible in that state. It's honestly a relationship with what is looking out through your eyes and what it is seeing. And it's as if the whole piloting process is like, from the identifications of what we're seeing, we are attempting to identify with the one looking through our eyes, and realizing that cannot have an identity. It's as if the hand holds an object, but the hand, right? So there is a sort of sight holding image, but it's not the image. Experience yourself as a collective being. That collective being has no fear, has no joy, but has access to the endless variations of it, to a point where it's as if you're like following the geometry of the moment like a branch, and you suddenly see this branch is endlessly going like as fast as the sky is, like the geometrical branch of perception can be. And when I give these talks, a lot of the ideas that I have landed in this plane of existence, I am telling you, it's as if pulling the string of the geometrical perception in the moment. After when it speeds up, emotions arise. That emotions create a sub-level, sub-opinion on the opinion, and that sub-opinion on the opinion creates a new opinion. It's as if like when somebody speaks, there's the idea before they have spoken, and then when they speak, they can't ignore hearing the sound of their own voice. So the sound of their own voice is going into their ears for the first time. Believe it or not, when I'm giving these talks, I'm hearing my own voice give the talk for the first time too. And it's as if midway in one idea being shared, the sound projects another layer of idea, and so it's as if it becomes multi-layered. I am pretty much saying it's as if from simplicity we are going towards complexity. The complexity is multidimensionality. This multidimensionality is something we're unacquainted with because we have been conditioned in civilization 1.0 to look at things only in a dualistic context. This is why I had to give this dualistic, the layers of duality, right? It's as if it's as if truth illusion, rather than wondering what if it is so beyond, right? It's as if you look at a person, you're like, this is a good person, this is a bad person. No way, there's so many different ways that a person can be. So similarly, it's like it dawns upon the person. Now, here's the thing. I say solo piloting This is in your inner realms. This is as if you could sit down, close your eyes, and then it's like you notice their attention can navigate. In front of your eyes, your attention moves as a physical body. Behind your eyes, your attention is watching the events of the mind. And it can choose to identify, like literally as if the events of the mind are a train and a person holds on to them and they just get carried by that momentum. But all these cultivations of mastering unknown dimensions, once you have mastered the unknown dimensions, and when I say mastered, that means you cultivate mastery, which means exposure. Mastery, they say anything you do for 10,000 hours, you become a master of. Do you know? And like everybody has mastered breathing. Do you know? Like we don't have a second thought about it. We have had so many moments of it occurring, right? So imagine a person cultivates various moments of experiencing their unknown self, being able to trust their unknown self, but not being ignorant of the street smart caution of the known self, right? So that means it's as if your physical self is like the spirit guide of your non-physical self, and like hilariously that your non-physical self is the spirit guide of your physical self. You know, it's as if it's the guide of your physical self. That means in unknown dimensions, your body, where I said be human first, the first headquarters, you gotta, it's like if you don't know the airport you lifted up from, right, you gotta quickly find an airport, right? But if you keep in mind the airport you lifted off, pilot started piloting from, then that airport is always there in your mind. So it's like a hidden sanctuary as an initial reference point that whatever you experience in, whether a yogic state of mind, a psychedelic state of mind, you center it back into the simple dimensions of how you're just being a human being. That means, I'll give you an example. Imagine somebody sits down, they close their eyes, and they suddenly see a phoenix in their inner realms, right? And because they're seeing the phoenix from, let's say, through the eyes of the phoenix in their inner realms, they feel they're a phoenix, right? Now, this is where the person got introduced to a content behind their eyes that they thought they were, and then that content can make you forget that you are actually just physically being sitting here, as if somebody again is sitting down closing their eyes. They're just a human being sitting on a rock in the middle of nowhere, but in their inner realms they feel they're a phoenix. You know, and so identification with that phoenix is the ignorance of the starting point of how your attention got to what it is seeing. And it's the same thing with those people who they say they have multiple personalities. The issue is that they are identifying with the content of their inner realm. So one moment they feel good, they think they have that kind of personality. You know, the one moment the person feels angelic, they're like, I'm an angel. You know, they have that personality. One person that does something bad, they feel demonic. It's like, I'm a demon. You know what I mean? So it's like these are archetypes. Like a cinematic of like a film roll is happening, and the person is identifying with the content of their conscious experience with a more, you can say, if the body is solid physical, the mind is like liquid. The mind, you can say, it's like as if it's like streams of thought, you know, or rivers of perception in the inner realms, rather than like there being again like a single object or internal object or photograph, you know. So it's dynamic. You got to get acquainted with the nature of the dynamic, and when something moves like a train, what do? You either get into it, you hold on to it, or you watch the train pass by. Same with our psychology, same with various moments that we enter, different moments in our life, and there's a different stimulus in the ecosystem, and in the ecosystem the stimulus makes something. I'll give you an example. Imagine a person is walking, person A is walking in the street, okay, and out of nowhere a person B comes to that person and says, hey man, you know, or you're the best person ever, or you're gonna be a great warrior, right? Now that person, or I'll give you a simpler example. Imagine you're walking in the street and you hear construction noise, right? the person doesn't identify as the construction noise. It's something that they can discriminate that is outside of themselves. But when it comes to the inner realm, the content of the mind, not a lot, I would say, when the person can discriminate what it is, it's literally like the sound of construction, like that construction noise. Just like a sound outside of us doesn't redefine us. Do you see what I mean? Like you hear birds chirping, it's like you don't suddenly think you're a bird. Do you know what I mean? Similarly, in the inner realms, content may appear, and the person has to have the discrimination to be able to station themselves as the unknown watcher. That means the pilot has to know where the free will is starting from. Pretty much, I mean, just look at this photograph, for example. This photograph, this person who stepped out of his airplane in a world where there's colors that he has never seen before, imagine, right? This pilot knows where his airplane is, and he stepped out beyond the plane of existence, you know? As long as you can keep in your attention where you started from, you can see whatever concepts in your inner realms. You can feel like a god, you can feel pathetic, you can feel incredible, you can feel lesser. There's so many ways that the mind will animate in the inner realms. And in the inner realms, because it's a faster state of being, I would say, the inner realms, you can in 1 minute, let's say 10 minutes walk to the grocery store, you can think of being like, I don't know, 100 different things in that moment, wherever your attention is going on. So the inner realms change quicker than the outer realms. So if a person is not comfortable with how the outer realms are changing, it's going to make it very difficult to be able to witness how the inner realms are changing, right? So it's as if you start from first observing the known world, the observable world, then we begin having a fascination for the unobservable. Now, in this piloting, I'm trying to constantly say this thing, that the more unknown the moment becomes, think of it as if when you start the piloting in your inner realms, it's 50% known, then it becomes 50% known, 51% known, and then, or let's say you start off as 100% known. Then as the person, it becomes more the internal, the witness of the inner, as they abide as the inner witness, the more the moment becomes unknown. So the ratio goes from 100% known, because it's never 100% known. It's like, maybe like, I would say 60% known. Let's say 80% known, 20% unknown, if you're someone really busy in the outer realms. But in the mystical experience of one's inner nature, one's inner space, the percentage is changing. So it's becoming suddenly like from 80% known and 20% unknown, it's becoming 60% known and 40% unknown, and this is a completely different state of consciousness. People who attain this, they have a different consciousness, different karma. And then imagine it goes to 50% known, 50% unknown, and this is where faith is. This is where faith comes into play. Now, when it becomes 100, let me say, when it starts from 51% unknown and goes to 60% unknown, this is where the demigods and the mind begins animating a sort of its own godhood. You know, it starts giving itself shapes that it couldn't give before in the ratio of the 80% known to 20% unknown. So starting from beyond the 50% unknown. Okay, so when it goes from 60% to unknown, demigod relationships of mystics really happen here. beyond, let's say you go 80% unknown, then you start looking through the eyes of those demigods that appear to you in your inner realms. Beyond 80% unknown, imagine you went to a point where you got to 98% unknown, and the only thing was left was the duality before your eyes, or the percentage, a small percentage of reality that is known. And when you are that unknown, it's as if I would say, it's like we thought we're just on a rock in the middle of nowhere, but the capacity of the intelligence behind our eyes has an ability to, or let me say it in another way. Let me present it in another way. 50% known, 50% unknown, you're like a human being with faith. When it goes to 60% unknown, you're becoming like the knowing of a group of people or a group of beings, which was the demigod idea, and then beyond that, you're becoming, imagine you're no longer identifying as a human being in 80% unknown, you've become planetary, you've become planetary, and realizing like you've become the eyes of the universe. You're no longer someone looking in the universe, you have become the universe seeing phenomena, right? And when it goes beyond that, there is no self in universe, and that is the edge of the sphere of the simulation of human psychology. That is where nobody can say anything. They're just some mystics who they have hidden smiles of, nostalgia or memories. Some people have memories where they're like, yeah, in my past life I was a pretty cool guy, But there's some people who their memories go beyond the past of the planetary activity. They begin perceiving events. It's literally like geometry hidden in the dark that suddenly is revealed by the conscious ability I shouldn't say consciousness at that point, to be able to abide as the awareness that was here in the room before you were, before the idea of you was, right? So it's as if it's like that's going beyond the relationship of soul and God, and it's going beyond the relationship of beyond 80% is beyond the relationship of looking through God's eyes, and then beyond that there is literally, it's as if it's a truth that can't be touched. And during that whole thing, in like, think of it as if the airplane is lifting off from the airport, from ground level, from the humanized ground level, and as it is going further, it goes in the sky, it reaches a point where the airplane can't even go. So even you are no longer a pilot at that point, I would say. That is really beyond the language threshold. And when I say language threshold, I'm talking about like the walls that the final curtain of individualism. So what do? You pilot in the unknown, and I wouldn't say if you stay there too long, you may forget your individualism, or you may be experiencing so many vast parallel perceptions that you may return no longer having the desire of individualism. Not that you're no longer an individual, but the desire. So the way you maintain it is that you I would say this is a very important perspective. You realize that whatever you experienced in the outer realms or in the inner realms is instantaneous. It's instant. In the instant, there is a strange equality between all conceivable forces. And that equality is so necessary, because if the person is not comfortable with the unknown and being the unknown, it creates an incredible level of suffering. I have, I'm not a psychologist. I don't have the wallpaper on my computer. I don't have the paper on my wall, but I have wondered about how we can help advance humanity. And in the advancement of humanity, I have cared to look at how people's minds are functioning, and I would say the way it's functioning, it's like everybody is inside a sphere. And when you have an ability to see beyond that sphere, it's kind of like how Socrates would say, the only true knowledge is to know that you know nothing. That's the thing. Just hear that sentence. To know that you know nothing. To know that you know nothing. The gift that Socrates has passed down to our generation. Now, these are very important. Right now, we have, for example, human rights based on certain nations and their perspectives, and then we have universal human rights, right? So there's a freedom of the individual to be an individual in this world. It's as if you've been born, you're alive once. Of course, there has to be levels of freedom for your perception. It's like we weren't born to be statues, and when the person is bogged down by, you can say, fixed beliefs, they in some sense have become a slave of their lack of effort to see what else there is. This is why I'm saying the unknown is the greatest divinity. Everything else, it's as if man is telling the universe what it should be. Unknown experiencers, those are the true explorers of the mind. So the aim of this is that you very few people truly go into that state and they're no longer a pilot, so no longer they manifest in reality. The way I perceive it is that this planet is a workstation and it's a giant airport, but it's an airport where in the outer realms in the future there's going to be like interstellar, where there's going to probably be someone, who's going to come and recruit people to pilot interstellar spacecraft, our own man-made interstellar spacecraft. And there will also, right now I'm saying, you could see me as that pilot who's saying, hey guys, we can pilot in the inner sky, and the inner sky awaits. That's where the greatest inventions of mankind arise. That is where actions and decisions are made. Some statements can be reconsidered. But what I'm trying to say is the healthiest approach is not that the person is transcending the human dimension and becoming a god. Like that's like unnecessary. We are all explorers of the human species, and we pilot in the outer realms and we bring the findings back to humanity, and we pilot in the inner realms and we bring the findings back. And the incredible thing about everybody having a different DNA and a different constitution of their persona is that everyone is a different pilot. Some people are more comfortable, for example, piloting in the known world or as the known self. Some people may have more of a cultivated comfort in being an unknown watcher of reality. You know what I mean? Like they're so there is more to our eyes than our eyes have the ability to contain. So therefore it's as if like to have an ability to not just be a giant in a world, but to be able to walk on the shoulder of giants. To stand on the shoulder of giants, that is really the honor of humanity. The giant is the universal massness of this event that is happening. And the simplest way to consider it is that I've termed it in other talks, and I've mentioned it here a couple times too, the grand happening. It's an occurrence. It's a verb, but we're all trying to figure it out as a noun. And this is why the educational system to the end of time has something to teach people and is creating followers rather than creating explorers. I am telling you, the day we see that people cannot graduate without adding something new to the educational system, then that's an educational system on the right path. Pretty much I'm saying the educational system needs to be like the Night's Watch, where it's defending the realms of men, the realms of human beings, but at the same time there's scouts going beyond the wall and we're perceiving what may come or what is happening and whatnot. So whoever you are, when anybody says mastery means experiential training, right? Somebody who wanted to master fighting with a sword, they would go into a forest back in the day, and they would master their strikes, And so the more you do something, the more familiarity you get with it. For example, I've spoken a lot in these talks. I have a familiarity, a comfort with just how to present or share things, for example, you know. But the mastery in an infinite world with an infinite self may be endless, right? So when I say mastering unknown dimensions, it's all about how we are piloting here. The body is temporarily being piloted by the free will, but what is piloting the free will is going towards states of unconditional ratios of beyond, you know, like around 80% unknown and 20% known. Right, when it becomes 80% unknown, 20% known, if it becomes to a point, this is where the mastery in your piloting is revealed, right? Where you have the contentment to experience incredible dehumanized inner realm states of perception, but at the same time be able to realize that they're all centered around the simple human idea. So whatever, at the end of whatever I talk about, I'm just some guy, you know. You know, this is how I keep my ego from wanting to be a god too soon. You know, it's as if there's a work that needs to be done. The alchemists called it the great work, and the great work was the transformation of lead into gold. And how lead was transformed into gold was that its whole being transformed. So as one becomes acquainted with the unknown dimensions of, let's say, the individual and the unknown dimensions of the world, they in some sense become the pioneer introducer of the perception that has not been there before. You see, it's as if we have surpassed the era of holy people and unholy people. It's a mysterious universe. It's a giant question mark. And rather than believing in exclamation points, we are keeping the question mark there, and it becomes a massive information archive. You know, I hope if I have the abundance for this, I would definitely initiate this, where I would create one of the greatest libraries of explorations of the inner workings of man's mind, of our intelligence. It's like a double-edged sword, and we have been focused on one side of the sword, not realizing the other side of the sword is there. Do you see? There isn't just an outer life. Everybody has an inner life, and that inner life is deciding and filtering the outer life and then choosing what it wants to present. For example, those people who become suddenly cruel, imagine there's two people who are friendly and one of them suddenly becomes a cruel person. That's someone who has locked down their inner realm. They have either devalued, they either have seen themselves more valuable than the other person, or the other person has kind of made them their value reduced. So it's a disconnection, as if the walls of my inner kingdom will not allow the outer realm kingdom, you know. But in the sophistication of the way I have perceived the advanced communicators in the future, the advanced communicators are not going to be in an attack and defense mindset all the time. We evolved, like how Drake says, we started from the bottom and now we're here. This creature, as it stepped from the sea, like our eyes biologically evolved underwater, evolutionary speaking. So it's as if we started from states of distrust, and think of it this way, it was as if fight or flight, the reptilian part of the brain, you know, in regards to the anatomy of the body. I am telling you, one of the most important things is cultivating this ability. Anybody who's wants to, in some sense, pilot their inner realms, it's this simple metaphor. This is, I would say, the best metaphor I can come up with about this. Just like, imagine you're walking into a door, okay, and there's another person at the same time as you. Imagine person A walking into a door and person B has arrived there, or person B, C and D have arrived there, right? So this is the ability I'm telling you need to have to, it's important to cultivate it for piloting the inner realms and mastering your unknown dimensions, is you open the door and let those ideas pass through. You don't fight in the same space of perception. Do you know? It's as if you let whether it's an image. Imagine you're like in your meditations or in your inner realms, you suddenly perceived an alien, like imagine, you know, and so it's as if you let that alien pass into time before you. rather than you being passed into time or you fighting over who gets to go into the door of the moment. It's kindness. When the Dalai Lama said compassion, he was giving one of the most advanced metaphysical teachings there are. Because without that if a person is cruel to an inner archetype, they identify, it dehumanizes you. Cruelty dehumanizes you. Compassion allows you to maintain your humanity in whatever perception you're in, whatever state you're in. And there is so much more to this, guys. I'm probably going to dedicate different episodes, probably one episode just focusing on what we can do about, the collective unknown. And what we can do about the collective known. Pretty much the outer world and the inner world, and then what we can do about the inner self and the outer self. And for example, medical sciences, they've incredibly advanced in regards to knowledge of the outer self, the known individual self. And ever since 2020, I declared that it's the era of advanced communication. That means I feel that there has been a strange authorization for this universal sector to begin to realize that it is more and more the universal sector. So the fear of change, once surpassed through multidimensional understanding, brings one a contentment to be able to be the freedom of all those dimensions at once. And there's a quote from Morihei Ueshiba. I'm going to read for you, the founder of Aikido. And I'll end it off, guys. Here's the quote. Morihei Ueshiba, this is one of the greatest quotes on this planet, guys. At least in my opinion. Morihei Ueshiba says, everyone has a spirit that can be refined, a body that can be trained in some manner, a suitable path to follow. You are here to realize your inner divinity and manifest your innate enlightenment. That means it's another way of saying that the advanced civilization is not built by people, it is built by the world as well. It's as if we are creatures from the earth, but there's a disconnection with earth and our nature. And so it's like once we reestablish that relationship, it would be as if the logos is another way of saying the planet is building the world through human beings. The Gaian mind, the planetary intelligence. I hope this episode has been helpful, and I say, one last thing I'll say. In my school of thought, every person I see, I am seeing them through three kind of archetypes that I have generated from my perception. One is the pilot of consciousness, one is the advanced communicator, and the other is a passenger in existence, right? The pilots of consciousness are those human beings where I would say if civilization was seen as a sphere, they are outside of the sphere, moving the sphere, contributing to the sphere. The advanced communicators, just like the pilot in an airplane is alone, is in the airplane, like the pilot's cabin. Do you see the passengers don't get to go to the pilot's cabin? Similarly, right, there's flight attendants. The flight attendants I have conceived to be the advanced communicators, and these are going to be incredible human beings who are going to slowly allow the fixation on duality of right and wrong to become multidimensionalized in the future. They are pretty much very patient and observant human beings, and these human beings, like flight attendants, they go to the passengers and they're like, what do you need? Do you need apple juice or orange juice? They begin in some sense making the species conscious of the dualism in which language has in some sense shackled our identities in. Direct experience is true piloting, and so the flight attendants are there in the plane of existence, but they are like inside the sphere, close to the edge of the surface. They have contact with the pilot. You see? Then there are the passengers, and the passenger doesn't care about where the world is going. The passenger doesn't care about, what it's going to get in the world. It's just sitting in a chair waiting to get to the destination, right? And we all start as passengers in the world, as if there's an intelligence before we are born that preserves our dimensions to be able to be even manifest, right? You can say poetically that parents are pilots of their children's souls. They're pilots of how the eyes of the child get introduced to the world. They are like introducing a new human being to the world that is new to that human being. But the world, of course, has many faces. I in one poem of mine, I wrote this sentence. It was pretty cool. I wrote, "The world faces many faces, and we face." What was it? Let me see. I said. Many faces face the world, and the world faces many faces. Something like that. And that means that we should not fear multidimensionality. We should playfully, as a species, be like, okay, we're just these simple creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and the complexity is left. That is the joy of the advanced mind. It is not convinced by its past when the future is waiting for it. And the future is not just a nullification where it's all here and now. Or I shouldn't say it's all here and now. I would say the future is an event, just like how the past was. And those who go into, let's say, truly you go to beyond 80%, that's when it's no longer an event. 80% unknown, 20% known. So, and every person requires to play their part, just like, again, like a soccer team, it's like the defender can't suddenly leave the goal line open. The goalkeeper can't suddenly get the ball and run and try to score a goal. And even though, anybody can fear anything, of course, the idea is that regardless of our individualism, the mind is like a space, and stuff is happening in the space, and the stuff that is happening in the space that we control, we identify to our individualism. So it's as if after you have experienced your individualism in simple states and complex states and known states and unknown states, then I will tell you, it becomes very joyous to experience collectively known states and collectively unknown states. Imagine, for example, Martin Luther King. He was like a pilot, and all those people at that time who were there, they were like advanced communicators, and all the people in the world watching that event were like the passengers of that moment. That is in some sense piloting in the known world. Now, when it comes to piloting as an unknown collective being, that is where there is an option of infinite projections. That means that it's like a state that is acquainted with infinitude. When it's acquainted with infinitude, there is an automatic, there is no threshold to energy. That means there is no getting tired. There is no getting sleepy. It's as if it's like post that, and it is geometrically, as if you access a geometrical realm, as if this whole time it's not that there is information about the world. The world is information. The world is information. It is in a certain format. Truth is. And so, dear listeners, in the outer realms, we require to pilot towards an advanced civilization, which means we're trying to make make the airport legit. We're trying to improve the airport, and in the inner realms, advanced communication needs to advance, which means various piloting and people being able to share the inner workings of their reality with the world that they're here for a limited time. Do you see? You can say, just like how I've said in other talks, there's a geometrical dimension. You can say there's a beautiful dimension to life, and that beauty is unconditional. Because usually the beauty we see in the outer realms is conditional. You know, it's based on things. This is like a beauty that is not based on anything, and I would say emotionally you're liberated. You know. Smooth flights. Thank you for listening. Much blessings and namaste.